Hello, Chris. It's great to meet you. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah,
Uh,
really good.
Congratulations on the film. I want to say congratulations because you have made me laugh and cry so much. I haven't cried like that watching an animated movies in so long. It's the last half of the film I was just in tears. I was fully sobbing. So congratulations on that.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to get to show everybody the finished movie.
Yeah, I can imagine. Absolutely. So I kind of want to start by asking you like a more general questions, but I would just love to speak about your passion for animated films, where it comes from, which film did you watch as a kid and made you think, I want to do this.
Um, one of the films I think all of us feel very fondly about, because it's one of the shorter films that Disney ever made, which is Dumbo. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just the sweetest thing in the world, and the animation is so beautiful, and there are moments in it that really and truly only animation could have done. And you can't improve on it. It's absolutely perfect. I always also throw out, it's not a movie, but Charlie Brown Christmas, which
Yeah.
as a kid like had a huge impact on me when I saw it. It still does. And I always talk about how, like, if you fixed it, it wouldn't work. There are things about it that are just they're relatively primitive, and there are little errors and quirks in it that it's perfect as it is. Uh, Likewise, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which is stop motion, but
Yeah.
like I love how the fur crawls on the abominable snow beast and stuff like that, the Bumbles. I love all that stuff so much, and again, you can't improve on it. Animation does have, now that I'm a grown up and we talk about these things together, it does have a directness that I can't really quite put my finger on why. It's efficient. It has a way of being very direct. And this is not mine. This is something that I heard Lupita say that I now repeat and give full credit to her. But she said animation allows us to feel big feelings, and I think that was such a beautifully s- stated thing. Like, um, perfect. And I 100% agree.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump on what you just said because I love animated films and I'm a big fan of DreamWorks and I absolutely love How to Train Your Dragon. And I find that every time I watch these movies, it takes me back to some really great core memories. Uh, for example, the music of John Powers is just beautiful. It brings me to tears every time. But I feel like and I watch these movies quite a few times a year, but I feel like every single time I watch them, I got a different perspective, like maybe a different point of view because we're still growing up and watching these movies. We're gonna have a different interpretation. So because we say animated movies are usually for all ages, it can speak to everyone. So I was wondering for you as a director, as a writer, animator, I was wondering if you feel like your vision as a director also changes. Do you feel a change within you, within your craft and how you write these movies?
I learn something every time I work on a project. One of the things I unfortunately have to continually relearn is, I just spoke of efficiency. I t if there's a point I'm trying to make or get something across, I tend to repeat it, and then inevitably I realize in the story process, as we build the story reels, I really only needed to do it once instead of, over and over again. You do it once really well, and it sticks, and you can move on. There are techniques and things that I've discovered on this particular movie. I've got two shots in the film that are, we call them oneers, which are these mega shots where the camera just doesn't shut down. We never cut, and we follow action for a protracted period of time. And it is very effective.
Mm.
Um, what I've discovered is it's absolutely worth the effort in a moment that you're trying to get like a big action sequence to really land and be satisfying. That it's worth the effort to do that, because I think one big shot can stand in for 20, 30 other shots that are all, choppy. So that's a good example of something I've learned. I probably continually overwrite and trim back in the editorial process, but I have learned not to go on too much. I think that if a character's got something to say, like, I try to keep it as minimal as possible. But I hear dialogue as music. there's something about the way my brain works. I don't hear lyrics in songs, so I can listen to a song for years and still have no idea, for the most part, what in the world the lyrics are even saying. Which I think is maybe a strength when it comes to what I do, because sometimes people, I'm going to now go the opposite direction. Sometimes I'll have extra lines in a character, the way a character is trying to get to a point,
Mhm.
because and somebody will say, well, we don't need this line. And I'm like, I think you do, because it's about the rise and fall and timing. And when it lands on the key moment and the word, if I don't have these other ones, it's not going to feel the same way when you get to it. So I might have a couple of uh, another an extra couplet in a dialogue, specifically because it makes me feel a certain way when you finally get to that key moment. So it's a bit of both. I say that those are amongst the things I've learned and added to my to my database. But I have always treated them seriously.
Yeah.
Um, I've always treated this very seriously. It's absolutely real. These are real beings with real thoughts, and they live and they breathe. And if you don't treat them like that, then this whole thing is gonna it's not gonna feel like it's gonna feel thin.
Mhm. One of the scene that you were talking about, is it the moment where Ross is running towards the edge of the cliff, and we get the camera, and the camera actually follows the action, and gets literally on the ground, and we follow Roz running, and that moment, it's, I think it's might be one of these moments you're talking about, is so beautiful, so incredible. It feels like you are immersed as an audience member in that scene. It's incredible. And so I was wondering, because I love the color palette as well. It's beautiful colors. It's a very, it really feels autumnal in a way. So I was wondering, when does a decision like this comes into account? When is it from storyboarding right from the start? Did you know from the start that this is the style of animation and colors that you wanted?
As for the style, it was definitely something that I was very focused on from the very beginning. I
Mm.
didn't want people, I wanted, the way I've termed it, I wanted people to see this film in the right way. I didn't want them to see it like a big cartoon, and I wanted this to be real. I wanted this to just feel like it has consequence. I wanted it to feel grown up. And so I was in the perfect studio at the perfect time and just got really, really lucky in that DreamWorks had made some huge advances visually in getting a more illustrated style up on screen with Puss in Boots: Last Wish and with Bad Guys. And Ramon Zebak and I had discussions early on. We had these exploratory sketches in color of different parts of the film, and they were soft and they were impressionistic. And we talked about, like, could that be the look of the film? Like that's the end. Like, we don't go beyond this. We stop right there. And that makes it sound like we're stopping early. In fact, it's the opposite. It means we would have to really push the look beyond where Puss in Boots was, for example. And so Ramon said, let's do that. And so he, Jeff Budsberg, our VFX supervisor, and their teams began working the problem. Meanwhile, we're working in parallel on the narrative
Mm.
in the story. And so I really felt very strongly about this particular thing. At a certain point, I was in Color Dailies, and that's a meeting where we talk about designs, we talk about anything visual. And I look at some of these color sketches as a way of honing in on what they should look like in the final film. And I was looking at what I thought was a color sketch, and somebody pushed a button and it started to move, and I realized, no, 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 that's the finished, that's the shot. And to complement that and to harmonize with that, we needed likewise painted surfaces on all the animals. So I can go further into this, but I'll try to stop myself because we have other things to talk about. But as for the color, I'm really happy that you talked about that one particular sequence, because it was very important to me that weather be present at all times in this movie. The closest thing to an idealized day where it's like a blue sky and white clouds and sun is probably the moment where Bright Bill returns from the migration.
Yeah.
And even that has been leavened with high clouds and shadows on the ground. That makes me feel like this whole thing is really happening.
Mm.
Um, I think that if it's just bright and sunny and clear, it again, I think we have the same problem. It begins to roll into another zone, which again, I love these movies that are more, I think, flamboyant and cartoonish and stuff like that, and that's great. But for this particular one, I really wanted to avoid that. Keep people, I didn't want to break the spell, if you will. of what we were doing. So that sequence where Roz walks up to the top of the mountain, we call it the signal, that sequence, and she activates her beacon, and it's at the end of after the flight montage. It's that whole sequence of the island is shutting down for the winter. It is some of the most striking and smart color work I think I've ever seen. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's a tribute to just Ramon and his team and their abilities and gifts as painters, to capture the vibe of the beginning of winter. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Because I read that you found the book through your kids' curriculum at school. Yeah, is it not?
Kind of. Yeah, I see that it's almost the reverse.
Oh,
It was around me because my daughter read it in school. It's something that's really common
oh,
for kids to read at a certain age level or grade level in school. But I first really saw it for real when I dropped into DreamWorks to see what was in development, and I was looking for whatever my next project might be.
yeah.
And when it described this book, it was amongst the things they laid out, and they described it very quickly. And I thought, oh, that's the one I'm really interested in. And after I read it and committed to the project, and I was starting it, I mentioned it to my daughter, and she's like, I read that, but you remember? And she pulled it off the shelf. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's I was right next to it this whole time. Uh,
Wow.
and then she, of course, she was really excited because it's one of the things I'm really looking forward to is there are many people who have read this, and I
Yeah.
think that they're going to be very curious to see the movie.
And so when you read this book, what was the first image that came to your mind? What was the first thing you imagined when you read the book about the movie?
Yeah, it would be hard to remember exactly what the first ones were, but it inevitably it must have been falling in place in sequence as I went through the book. Certainly by the time I got to the inciting incident where Roz quite literally runs across this nest, there were things that were coming to mind. They were of a level, though, of sophistication that I would liken to the way that I felt when I was a kid and I saw Bambi. And that was the level of like sophistication and immersion that I was feeling and seeing as I was reading the book. And that's where this whole thing started.
Mm.
Um, and I was insistent that we reach a certain altitude as far as its artistry.
Mm. I would love to speak with you about your relationship to music because I think the music is it's from Chris Bowers this time. It's gorgeous and it's so epic. And so it really there's really this balance between epic and adventure and funny. And so the music is beautiful and some of the movies that you made in the past also have some of the most beautiful movies that you can hear in animated movies and that some soundtracks that I listen to all the time. So I was wondering what was your relationship to these musics and what they bring to you and when do you imagine them when working on the film actually?
From the very beginning, I don't think I have written anything or storyboarded anything
Mhm.
without having music playing during the creation of it. It
Okay.
drives it drives it for me
Yeah.
as I'm trying to create these things. It's driving my imagination, and I put a premium on music. On 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 Lilo and Stitch, I learned from Alan Silvestri that it can actually be a storytelling device.
Yeah.
It does some of the heaviest lifting story-wise. I feel like it's unassailable. It doesn't accidentally get laughed at. Like a piece of dialogue might be misinterpreted and suddenly be funny and you didn't mean it to be, but that doesn't happen with music. And so Dean DeBlois and I we worked together on How to Train Your Dragon. He would deliberately build houses for music within a movie, within a story,
Mhm.
places where we would insist that the characters stop talking and music really becomes the voice of the movie. Forbidden Friendship is the sequence where Hiccup and Toothless are alone in the cove and no one's talking, and music is doing all the storytelling in that bit. And it has enough room to really develop and become what it needs to be. And that's really on display in The Wild Robot. And Chris Bowers and I would discuss that exact thing. And music is incredibly present and incredibly important in the movie. And the flight montage and the migration would be an easy one to point to. Characters say very few things, and the music takes over. In fact, Chris reminded me that while we were working on the migration sequence, there came a moment where I said, you know what? Stop looking at the visuals. Just just write the music. Like we will then we'll tailor the visuals to match your music. I will modify things, but
Mhm.
I didn't want him to have to like cut something short, end something early, or have to drop levels for
Mhm.
anything going on screen. I wanted that music to be able to develop and grow and become as big and as healthy as it wanted to be. And
Mhm.
I wanted to give him the freedom to like stretch his wings and fully develop those themes and let them be what they needed to be. And that's exactly what we did. Like he wrote the music without any sort of limitation or any parameters that the visuals would have stop him. And then we came in and we retimed everything so it would match his music. So
Mhm.
I think it's one of the reasons it works as well as it does is because it's not hindered by a quirk that ended up in a storyboard.
Again, I just want to say congratulations on everything because honestly, The Wild Robot is gonna be, I think it's gonna be an all-time classic, an instant all-time classic. I am not saying this lightly. And again, you made some of the most important movies that you can show to kids, coming into adulthood. I just want to say thank you for everything that you have done for animated films in general. Yes.
Oh, well, all credit to Peter Brown for his wonderful book. So thank you so much.